beginning of the year, she's now back at work. She couldn't even drive her car. Now she's driving her car all over the place. In fact, she even drives her husband's car. And she drives a big car. She drives a Lexus. Not a Lexus. She drives a Mercedes SUV, one of the big ones. And I said, I can see why you got anxiety. You driving this big SUV. I'd have anxiety driving this big old SUV myself. But the last time I wanted to take a picture of her leaving my office with the big SUV driving her husband. They went down to New Orleans for her daughter's wedding, and she was down there sheening her husband all around. Sheening means driving her husband all around, and her husband said she wouldn't let me drive because she was just driving all over the place, Dr. Happy, and she wouldn't even let me drive. So that case was a very exciting, very enjoyable case because now she's back in work and she's back into her power again. And so her husband, both of them are in this ANCAR 2000 program that I spoke about. So her husband, now he goes to his cardiologist to get a test on his heart, a stress test, and the cardiologist say, what have you been doing? You aced my stress test, which means now you're not going to be stroking. You're not going to need to have another stent in your heart. And so both of these people went through my program, and now they are at the maximum of the ANCAR 2000 program. They run 2,000 breaths. They have the third wind, and at the same time, she has control over her nervous system where if she even feels anxiety coming on, she can stop it in instant time.
Wow. And I'd have to say, that's coming in to you, asking you as a couple to assist the both of them, and now them working physically at their optimum level with the program. I'd imagine, what that's done, positively for their relationship to be able to improve their health together. So it's a wonderful thing. Just a quick reminder, just if you have a question, you can go ahead and post it on the Ignite Your Soul Connection Facebook page, or you can raise your hand. We say raise your hand by pressing 1 on your touch-tone pad with your phone or mobile device. I have a question. You mentioned earlier in the conversation about learning more about breathing in yoga than the positions. I remember when I told you that I was starting yoga, and one of the first questions was really more so about what were we learning, or I think you mentioned more about the focus needing to be more on breathing. And I just wanted to really kind of get you to talk a little bit more about that, because there's so much yoga, this class, that class, hot yoga, fancy yoga. I really like the way that you articulated, the point and purpose of people going into a yoga class and being a yoga master. I really would like for you to share a little bit more about that.
Well, let's look at. Well, first, let's see if we finish answering the brother's questions. Did you have any other questions to that question, brother? Did that give you a thorough understanding of what I do and how that could help? Okay, that might have answered his question.
Yeah,
the yoga.
Hello?
No, go ahead.
You guys can hear me?
The yoga.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. It muted me. I was just going to ask. It made sense, to me, and my intuition says it is good. So my question was, how does one begin? How does one get started into getting into the program?
Well, you would call me, and then you would come see me, and we would start you in the program.
I'm in New York, unfortunately.
That's a little hard.
Little bit.
That's a little hard.
Not impossible, just a little harder. And we'll get his information.
You have to be taught this in person?
It's best to be taught in person because there's some testing we have to do on you. We have to find out. See, there's certain triggers that's happening in your body that's causing this anxiety. And we have to be able to identify those triggers and neutralize those triggers so that when you go through this anxiety, there is a mechanism that is broke that we have to fix. So we have to see you in person and do that.
Yes, understood. Well, we'll definitely put that out there into the intention. And I look forward to meeting you one day.
Real good. Real good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Now you were talking
Hello,
about. Yes, I'm here. Now you were talking about.
Yes.
You started to talk about the breathing in yoga.
Yeah. So the breathing in yoga is a particular pattern of breathing that you learn. And with this breathing, it teaches you how to focus your mind. And when you focus your mind, you learn how to what we call melt the body. People talk about flexibility in yoga. And because they're not into the breathing as much, they stretch their bodies. When they stretch their bodies, they're actually injuring themselves. Because when you're dealing with the breath in yoga and you're learning how to melt the body, your muscles, they relax, your ligaments relax. And when they relax, you don't strain the body. You comfortably go into the forms. You observe yourself going into the forms, and you go into the forms very easy, and you come out the forms very easy. So the goal is to become so absorbed in your breath that you enter into the forms with the least amount of strain. You step out of the forms with the least amount of strain, and through daily practice, you're able to progress more and more. So you're able to master the forms. Now, one of the forms is a tree pose. You were introduced to the tree pose, Janice?
Yes.
Okay, the tree pose is a very interesting pose to let you know if you are absorbed in your breath, because you start learning how to control and master gravity. And if you're not in the breath, you're going to be falling out of the pose all the time. It takes you forever to learn the tree pose because you're not learning that the control of the breath is the control of the gravity. And that's what you're learning how to do. Focus the mind on the breath, so when you really got control of the breath, you have control over the tree pose.
And you mentioned, you were speaking earlier, and you mentioned that when people are doing yoga and they're stretching the body, that's actually, did you say injuring the body?
Straining. The straining becomes
Straining.
an injury.
The straining
Right,
becomes
because they're not in the breath. When you're in the breath, it is a very joyful harmony moving in and out of the forms. Very joyful harmony. When you're not in the breath, you're physically stretching the body. You're physically trying to force the body. You're actually in a fight with your body. And then the body gives you the pain for you forcing it into the forms rather than melting into the forms with harmony in the breath.
And that being said, what would you recommend as being maybe a first, if someone has never done yoga, or if they are and they would like to know more about that side of yoga, what type of yoga or what form of yoga would you recommend as being the best place to start? Well, the form of yoga that I teach is called
Kemetic Yoga, and they can order some DVDs from me.
Okay. All right, and we'll talk about that.
Then they can start learning, because we spend a lot of time in the breath. We spend a lot of time. We don't even start doing the forms until you've already practiced the breath for perhaps 5 to 10 minutes. We don't start any forms until you start learning the breath first.
Okay. Now, someone just asked, they asked which form of yoga is the best, but they still wanted to know your take. And they did get a bit of an answer from your answer a few moments ago, but they did want to hear your take on Bikram yoga.
Well, actually, that yoga is it's a series of forms that's formed from the whole yoga system. The whole yoga system is 840,000 forms, broken down into 8,400, broken down into 84. So Bikram picked about 26 forms, and these forms people would practice every day. Well, when we first started teaching yoga, we were teaching yoga at a center that in the summer it was hot because it was on the 3rd floor. So heat would always rise in the summertime. it was so hot, the windows would be open and it would still be burning up inside. So people would be coming out their clothes and sweating all over the place. So we were doing hot yoga 40 years ago before they even came up with Bikram hot yoga. And then in the wintertime, because the heat was so good in there, the people would be sweating in the wintertime. So we were doing hot yoga before they even called it hot yoga. But now the 26 forms that they do in the Bikram yoga, we extend our program a little more deeper than that, because there are certain forms that we do in our system that's not in the yoga system. These particular forms were taught back in the day of the ancients. Back in Kemet, these forms were taught, and these forms were the missing link between yoga and Tai Chi. And when you did these forms created the physics of motion from the triangle. So when you learned these forms, they tapped into your nervous system and they gave you the secret to the flow, the secret to what they call the falcon wings. And so these forms, the Indians did not learn these forms. So these forms are hidden. The one particular form is called the Pose of Immortality. This form is very, very powerful. And it is the centerpiece of the whole Kemetic yoga system that's not in the yoga system, is not in the Bikram system, is not in any of those systems.
Wow. And I think I mentioned before, I think it was last Christmas, I was at a friend's, and we decided that we wanted to do some yoga. And they were like, oh, I have this really amazing DVD. You have to check this out. This style of yoga is just amazing. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try, so forth and so on. And we pop it in, and I was like, this person looks familiar, And it was just really exciting to be able to see that. And it was just really, it was challenging, but at the same time, you could really feel, the flow and how things were moving. And again, the focus and concentration was definitely outside of the physical. So towards the end, we'll definitely give our listeners more information about Kemetic yoga, Egyptian yoga, and where they can get their own copies or find more information. And before we go into any other questions, one quick note that I wanted to touch base with was actually you mentioned the sound and breathing. You had assisted a client in finding a specific sound in breathing, and that was a part of the healing process. Could you share a bit more about that?
Well, I'll go even a little deeper. You've heard of cerebral palsy?
Yes.
Have you ever seen somebody with cerebral palsy?
Yes, I have.
And in that problem, the person is shaking all over the place, right? When they walk, they shake a lot when they walk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I was an intern as a naturopath, this was in 1977, I had just finished my academics, and I was now in my internship seeing clients. And 3 weeks after I became a doctor as an intern, there was a patient that came into the clinic who had cerebral palsy. And this patient could not hold her head up. She had never been able to hold her head up her entire life. She was 18 years old, and she had never laid down in her entire life. She couldn't lay down on her face, and she couldn't lay down on her back. So she couldn't lay down on the front or the back because of severe convulsive spasms. So at that particular time, I was introduced to this patient because the doctor who was supposed to see her had missed the clinic that day. My room was right next to his, so they gave me this patient. Since she couldn't lay down, she was complaining of pain in her legs, and I had a chance to work on her, and I observed how bad her nervous system was working, and this extreme amount of spasms, and the fact that when she tried to lay down, she would go into an extensive convulsive spastic state. And so I referred her back to the clinician who was supposed to see her, to the intern who was supposed to see her.